Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Spodcast. I'm Rootscar, and with me are Alex, Chris, and Josh. Now, Josh, I understand that before we get on to the very serious topic of staying on topic, presumably, you had some Patreon-related stuff to get out of the way, so why don't you go ahead and do that.
So we forgot to do Patron Week. So that's a thing. That'll be next week here. I realized on Friday that we hadn't done Patron Week, and I didn't want to try to put up a poll on Friday to do it and then record the next day. So we're going to take care of that this next week here, and apologize for that. This last month has just been everything that could go wrong did go wrong, man.
Yeah, no, Josh has been living out his personal
car. I had to get another car. My hot water heater blew up, but I already talked about that. Just all kinds of fun stuff.
Just financial version of Final Destination.
Yeah, a bit. Also, we hit our first stretch goal, and then we unhit it through, I think, credit card declines, because Patreon started charging credit cards, and I was watching the dollar amount on my Patreon public-facing Patreon page just drop by $10. But then the person who actually pledged sufficiently to bring us up to $650 actually increased their pledge, so that we are now back up at $650. I think. I hope I'm not saying this.
I can hear the frenzied tapping as you make these calculations in the background to determine
I was actually logging into Patreon because I forgot to do that.
Just to determine exactly how on track we are with the computer's projections, our own projections, our analysts' projections for Spodcast Incorporated, spoiler warning, LLC.
So, what that means is the stretch goal is that we now do quick looks at least twice a month, once every 2 weeks. So we're going to record one of those this week sometime, and that'll go up sometime this week, presumably after this does. And then 2 weeks from now or so, we'll do another one, and that'll be a patron-selected quick look. So the voting stuff will be going up for that shortly. Also, to $5 patrons and above, there will be hopefully a thread up by now where you can suggest games for this month's Patron Week. And maybe we'll do a Patron Week at the end of this month too. I don't know. Make up for it. So yeah, that's what you guys have to look forward to.
All right, and now one interesting thing is that sometimes we discuss things ahead of time. Sometimes we don't, which is to say that Josh kind of does all the planning behind the scenes, and then when we arrive, it's just everything is under a cloche, which you just we sit down, there's just the silver dish there. He's all right, so here's what we're doing this week. Just kind of cracks that open. You see some kind of 90s era abomination lurking.
I will point out, just for the record, that the only 90s era abomination we've done on this show was at your behest.
That may be true, yes. But on the other hand, I feel like Battlespire is such an important part of gaming history, and I feel like if I don't keep it alive,
really is. It was a real touchstone moment for a lot of people.
You say that, but it was a video game made by one of the biggest game developers in the world right now, which is in their main franchise, at least franchise setting, which is nearly totally forgotten. And I think that's very important. It's like if there was a Star Wars spin-off in the 70s that... Oh, fuck, the Christmas special, right? Okay. It's like if the Star Wars Christmas special was less well-known.
there were other Star Wars spin-off movies in the 80s that were like aimed at children.
Yeah, like the Ewok cartoon.
Oh, right, yeah.
No, there were live-action Star Wars movies that came out in the 80s that were like low-rent, straight-to-VHS things. Let me look this up.
Are you getting confused and thinking about the cutscenes in Dark Knight? Or not Dark Knight,
no.
Jedi Knight? Because that had live action in it. Kyle Katarn is my favorite Star Wars guy. He's all beardy.
Yeah, Caravan of Courage, an Ewok Adventure, is a 1984 American television film based in the Star Wars universe. It is the first of 2 spin-off films featuring the Ewoks from Return of the Jedi. This film, which is set on the moon of Endor sometime after the Ewoks animated series but before the events of the Return of the Jedi, focuses on the struggles of 2 young humans, a brother and sister, trying to locate their parents who have been kidnapped by a monster known as the Gorax. This is a real thing that actually happened.
It's hard
no
to
one
care
remembers
about it. It's hard to care about knowing that once the Death Star 2 blows up, all that mass would rain down on the Endor moon and wipe out any life on that planet, moon, whatever it is.
I believe that's been officially, like, excised from canon.
I don't care if it's excised from canon, it would happen.
Can somebody just cold ambush Bob Iger and just, like, demand to know what the canonicity of a Caravan of Courage and Ewok Adventure actually is at this point? Is Rey going to bump into a Gorax?
I'm looking at the I'm looking at, well, I mean, they might soon. I'm looking at the VHS cover, the poster for it, and it's 20th Century Fox. It doesn't even list Lucasfilm. It might be a 20th
production
Century
company
Fox
was Lucasfilm and Cordy Films, and interestingly enough, the distributor was Disney.
Oh, okay.
Can you imagine if 21st Century Fox came up with some kind of legal jujitsu and released a sequel to the Ewok Adventure using their Caravan of Courage rights? They just like dumped it in like right before episode 9 comes out. Oh, actually, wait. Okay, no. Disney does not currently own 21st Century. Wait, or do they? They own Fox.
They're working on it.
21st Century Fox? What are you even talking about?
21st Century Fox is the holding company that owns 20th Century Fox and a lot of other Fox holdings, but it is not News Corp.
That's an awesome name for it.
But yeah, Disney is putting in a bid to buy
20th
them.
Century Fox, so we'll make a company that's above it that's 21st Century Fox. I remember renting this film as a kid and hating it. That's the reason I know about this. And it's one of those things that, like, if I didn't have proof that it existed, I would have thought that I dreamed about it and like, it wasn't real. But no, this is a thing that happened. Warwick Davis was in it.
It is a very special thing when you rent a movie as a child and hate it. I'm not sure that actually ever happened to me.
Oh, I'm sure it happened to me. I'm just trying to think.
Because, like, as a kid, I was just like, yay, I'm watching a movie at home with my folks. Like, before age, 9 or 10 at least. Like, there was no real movie that was bad enough. I do remember I felt a sense of malaise after Little Monsters.
Is that the one with Howie Mandel?
Yeah.
Yes, that was the one I was going to mention, actually. So,
Oh,
yeah, I feel like
shit.
that movie... that movie kind of just has disappointment baked in. I thought of another one. Drop Dead Fred was not as funny or as goofy as I was hoping.
Oh, there's a connection here. I think the key thing about Little Monsters is that it's just like a miserable movie. It's not like just like a dumb one or a lame one. It's like it makes you feel weird and bad.
I mean, I just feel bad for Howie Mandel looking at the poster at this point.
I don't know if I feel bad for Howie Mandel as a general rule. Anyway, so we're gonna move on a little bit here. I just found myself trying to follow back the chain of digressions here, but ultimately it came back to Battlespire, and I don't know if there's anything worth saving there. So we're just gonna cut straight to Josh. You've been playing some video games lately, which in some ways actually distinguishes you from the rest of us. Is there any chance any of them is a new release?
Kind of.
Oh, let's hear about that one.
I've been playing this game called Exiled Kingdoms, and I want you to just, like, before I describe it to you, like, open up the Steam page and tell me what it looks like to you.
Can I just guess right here and now? Because I'm going to guess.
Sure,
it
yeah.
It's a castle and a river. And there's also a wooden gate.
I'm imagining
I
survival.
think all those things are in the
roguelike.
game. It is not a roguelike. It is a, like,
This looks like Fallout.
low-rent Diablo-esque game with an open world. It's like 2D isometric, and it's originally for, like, the iPhone, so this is actually a port of a mobile game. But it actually, like, it works really well, and I actually kind of love this game, except that it keeps, like, I've like, it doesn't have a great autosave system. So I got outside, I beat a dungeon, ran outside, forgot to save, and got killed by something, and ended up at the back of the beginning of the dungeon. And then last night I beat the dungeon again, got out of the dungeon, and the game crashed before I could save. So I ended up back at the beginning of the dungeon again, because you can't save in dungeons. But it's got this really interesting thing where you can see it in one of the screenshots, like the third to last screenshot you can see on the Steam page, like the overworld map and how it's broken up into, like, grid squares there. Those like, that reflects the actual arrangement of the game world. Like, it's like isometric screens of these things that are represented on the map. So, like, if there's, like, a mountain range to the south of you on the map, if you go down towards it, on like, in the isometric, like, normal world map, you will see mountains pop up. Like,
Oh, that's cool.
it's a really interesting way of designing a game where you just say, like, okay, we're just gonna, like, replicate the world map in the game.
That's actually, can I just get this out of the way real quick? That's one thing that I dislike about the world map for The Elder Scrolls Oblivion. Because Morrowind, to me, had one of the most exciting game maps that was ever really released. Because it did actually, like you say, it depicted the game's world with, like, such fidelity and, like, with so many details. Like, you felt like each hill and rock that was drawn on there was, like, an actual possibility or an actual space that existed in the game. It was just, looking at it really promised you that you're in for that kind of adventure. I think that that's something that games kind of forgot for a while.
Also, Cyrodiil was the most boring fucking setting I have ever seen in an RPG.
You know, I gotta say that I find Skyrim somewhat more boring.
I feel like we're kind of in, like, Viking overload now, but, like, when Skyrim came out, it was a little bit more novel at the time, I want to say.
It was a little bit more. I think the thing that ultimately kind of soured me on that game was that not enough of what you discover in the overworld is interesting, and also it's just so relentlessly monochromatic.
Yeah. I always install, like, and this is, Skyrim is, like, the one game I do this for, because I generally find, like, I install a color mod on it, a lighting mod. I generally find that lighting mods tend to just fucking ruin games. And you get, to get high contrast, you crush all the, you do what in color correction is called crush the blacks. You make it so that dark tones are, very, like, there's a very small band of, like, darker tones. And so you lose a lot of the detail in the shadows and stuff, which looks awful and is not at all how your eyes work. And they tend to, like, turn up the saturation to ridiculous levels and all this kind of, like, awful stuff. And add a whole bunch of fucking sharpening, which I hate. But in the case of, I feel like in Bethesda games, I make an exception because I feel like their art department legitimately sucks on some, like, I don't know if it's direction level or competency level or whatever, but, like, Skyrim is a very boring looking game.
Yeah, I mean, I even just compare screenshots of, oh boy, we're really going to get into this rousing circle jerk here. I'm going to cut us off here.
I feel like Fallout 4 was a step in the right direction. Fallout 3 was bad too.
There
I mean, you
go.
can kind of see it from that era.
Yeah.
Fallout 3 was just green filter. But Fallout 4, has some decent, color direction and stuff.
Even just the art direction in general in Fallout 4, I think, is definitely a step up. Everything has a kind of a roughness and a specificity to it that I think is lacking in a lot of Bethesda's kind of like mid 2000s work. It's to sort of early 2010s work. I think kind of like now that we're leavening this a little bit, I'm gonna kind of edge in here. I think that when it comes to Bethesda's like armor and kind of clothing design, one of the most graphic demonstrations of what I don't like is you can look at bone mold armor in Morrowind and then compare it to bone mold armor in one of the Skyrim expansions, and in Morrowind there's a lot of kind of detail to it, like a lot of kind of uniqueness and like a lot of kind of like flourishes and little touches, and like kind of that there's the sense that each piece of this armor was designed. There's a sense that this armor is the product of somebody who's like really getting down and settling down with it in like in a very organic way. And it's very possible to find it ugly and maybe not be fond of the final design, but it has the sense that some in-game craftsmen worked on this, whereas the Skyrim design is much more like holistically like integrated, where like you look at it and it has definitely like it has a look to it, but it also doesn't feel as much like something that like a real person in this game world worked on as much as it is sort of like a single piece, like a single unit. I think part of that probably does come down to the fact that Bethesda sort of moved in the direction of making outfits like an entire set rather than individual items. But I think at the end of the day, it had that secondary effect, which was undesirable.
Yeah, I agree. I kind of hate all the equipment in Skyrim, almost all. Actually, the lower level stuff is way better than the higher level stuff.
That is true. You know what? I was actually about to say that. The higher level stuff looks a little too glossy. Like it looks kind of like it has a little too unified and like comic book superhero-ish. Like 2010's comic book superhero look to it, where it's kind of like a vinyl chunky jumpsuit.
It doesn't help that like in Skyrim and Elder Scrolls lore, like the higher level equipment is this exotic stuff like glass and Daedric, which is just wear murder spikes as armor.
Yeah, I actually quite like the iron armor look in Skyrim.
Yeah,
and I like the leather armor look too.
And the steel greatsword looks really good. Aside from the fact that all the weapons in that game are kind of just like big paddles, like they should be a lot thinner, and I don't know why they're not. Like it's not like you're making these things physically; you can make them look whatever you want. Like it's not like someone needs to like you can't pick out the sword that well from a distance, regardless of whether it's 2 pixels wide or 1 pixel wide. Like why are these things too big?
After Oblivion, it's like any Bethesda weapon design is going to feel sensible.
Yeah. Anyway, Exiled Kingdoms is fun. It's like $8. Yeah, it's $8, and it's Diablo combat with like Fallout-esque world. The writing is not good. Don't come for the writing. But it's serviceable. But it's just
what are its ambitions?
I just like some of the screenshots I'm seeing. Like one of the screenshots has a character named Spice Trader Jethro, and that is like my favorite character name ever.
That definitely sounds like a 70s like alt rock band.
Yeah, I met him recently, and he just told me to fuck off. Actually, it seems like it's just aiming to be like an old school like. You kind of have a party system, so you could say it's a little bit Baldur's Gate Icewind Dale-y, but like that kind of like you put a player in a world and give them some vague quests and have those quests lead to dungeons for loot. It's 2D isometric medieval fantasy Borderlands is what I'm saying.
That sounds good. Well, all right. So that's one of the more modern games you've been playing. Then, when was that game released?
The 23rd, but it came out earlier on phones and tablets and whatever.
So that is a new release, albeit one. Wait, actually,
yeah.
Hang on. How did you hear about this?
I saw it on the new releases tab.
Oh boy!
I was like, "Huh, this looks neat. I can drop $8."
You deserve a small medal for straight up buying a Steam new release that you've never heard of. That is praxis that I am not always equal to myself.
I used to find games doing that, but then the store bloated and they never really fixed their interface, and the new releases tab was just full of. It's now new and trending, so if your game doesn't have a enough of the momentum already, it doesn't show up there. And then you can actually just look at all new releases, but it's almost all DLC.
You know, I've worked on like 3 Steam new releases at this point, and I still couldn't tell you how the system worked at any discrete occasion in which we launched a title. Fortunately, in each case, somebody else did, but...
Yeah, it's definitely a thing. Like, I don't know if we want to get into Steam stuff. We've ranted about it before, especially Chris.
Yeah. Although, one of these weeks, we should really do an itch.io episode.
Oh, that'd be cool. Just, like, trolling. We could do that as a stream, like, spend 6 hours and just, like, buying and playing itch.io games that we've never heard of.
That sounds like a plan. We should do that sometime. I mean, I'll be honest. If I end up releasing a game independently at some point, it is 1,000% going to be on itch.io. Not just because I actually understand it, but also because whatever game I make is probably going to be too shabby to make it on Steam.
Well, I don't know. I recently saw a tweet about someone who bought a game on Steam and installed it, and it was literally just an empty folder on their hard drive. So I feel like the bar there is lower than you might imagine.
Wow. Anyway, Josh, anything else you play that you want to talk about?
Just been playing some Overwatch and PUBG, really. Oh, and a little bit of Left 4 Dead, but we did that on the stream, so...
What exactly prompted you to come back to Left 4 Dead? By the way, yes, there is a Twitch stream of us playing Left 4 Dead.
It has one of the best fucking runs we have ever done on the second level of Blood Harvest, where... It was Glitch and I and 2 community members. One of them died, like shortly after the spawn, and we were just running it. And then the other one ran into the witch, ran away from the witch, and Glitch and I were just like, fuck it, we're just gonna walk right past the witch. And the witch woke up and started chasing Glitch. But we managed to run all the way to the end before the witch could catch up to us. I've never done that level like that before. Or really, that almost never happened. And this is expert realism, by the way. It's not normal difficulty where you can just kill a witch in straight up combat.
Do you remember that time? I really wish we'd been recording it. That one time it was you and me and someone else, and like there was a witch, and we were on expert, and it was just the 3 of us left, and we wanted to kill it, but like we couldn't get into an angle to just crown it. So I jumped up onto like a generator, and the witch was aggroed. Like I aggroed the witch by catching a piece of it, and the idea was that it would run out and the 2 of you would shoot it. But then like you just got shot, friendly fired instantly, and the witch ran right past and killed me.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And that was before the event.
On the 4th level of Blood Harvest once, I was playing on expert with Glitch was there, and I don't remember who else was. Might have been Randy. And I ran out, I bad things had happened, and I was the only one left alive, but I was like running out onto the bridge where the train car is with the safe room. And I thought like I had a clear path and everything, and I was just like firing off into the distance at like some zombies that were coming up with a shotgun, and then suddenly I hear the witch trigger, and it turns out the witch was at the end of the bridge, and I accidentally hit her with a little pellet, and she ran up and murdered me. And I was 10 feet away from the safe room, and it was the worst.
As it happens, I've been playing a game kind of obsessively as of the last few days. I caught some meme which made a reference to Darkest Dungeon, which is not a game I had actually really played before.
Oh,
but
really?
Yeah, it's a game that I bought for my partner years ago. She was very, very fond of it. But I never really got into it myself, because here's the thing, I actually am not a huge fan of JRPG-style turn-based combat.
Same.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would
It's
describe
serviceable at
Darkest Dungeon
times.
as having JRPG combat, though.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah? I mean, it's basically the same. Okay, hang on, let me take a step back there. I am not sensible to how it is different. So I'm actually kind of curious. What would make you say that?
Well, oftentimes your characters don't die quickly. Like, they're not expendable. You don't have the often you don't have the row system with like spell distances, like that tactical element's not really a part of a lot of JRPGs.
Yeah, I can't think of a JRPG where I've seen that.
That is true. Okay, let me put it this way. It is turn-based, unlike a game like an Infinity Engine or Western RPG. It is turn-based, unlike a game in which your characters... Okay, so basically, there's two schools of thought for real-time and turn-based gaming. One is one in which turns are used as kind of a necessity to provide a structure, but which the goal is still basically like a simulation of something that is real, like the production of like a facsimile of an actual fantastical battlefield that is still somewhat approachable game-wise. So like old school 70s war games are like at this style. And then there's what I could personally consider like to be the JRPG style, where it's like the combat is inherently abstract. Where there's, the use of abilities and the use of kind of the turn structure is something that is clearly not meant to be a direct representation of time passing, but is instead like it's a game mechanic like you would see in like a board game. So more like card game and less like, again, old school war game. But this is I probably a very messy definition. So Darkest Dungeon is the second one of those.
I would hone in more on like whether or not combat takes place in the rest of the game world, or you are sequestered off to a background and your characters are dumped on it and there's not really any kind of like movement about an area. And a lot of JRPGs don't really do that specifically, but like if you want to like delineate the two, I'd say that like one kind of turn-based is like you are a character versus an enemy, you use abilities versus the character, and there's no environment attached to that.
That's an interesting way of making a distinction, but also, again, like in Darkest Dungeon, the actual environments themselves are very clearly like abstract from the outset. Like there's
Right.
hallways and then there's rooms, and the actual features of the hallways and rooms once combat begins are irrelevant. Like it doesn't really matter what it looks like, how big the room is. Like there's no different sizes of rooms. The room is just like literally a zone delineated in which you can find an object, or you can have a combat, or you can rest. It's sort of that straightforward. But anyway, I generally don't like combats that... And I think Chris said same, and I kind of wonder, actually, now that we've had this whole sort of argument about, like, not liking certain kinds of combat, and, like, what those kinds even are, what Chris was saying same to.
No, I'm coming off of, like, 30 hours of Anachronox, and I'm kind of done with JRPG combat for, like, the next couple months at least.
So, like, what is it specifically that you find yourself coming off of, at least?
I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this. There are JRPGs that do the whole strategy thing pretty well, and actually have a really interesting dynamic back and forth system. But those really tend more towards the like tactical stuff. Like I love Disgaea because Disgaea is like all the combat fighty stuff, and that really isn't even like a turn-based. I mean, it is turn-based, but it's not like what we're talking about when we say JRPGs at that point. But I really don't like watching people do their moves, and a fight that really is not that mentally taxing, and I'm basically just going through the motions and watching the same animations play out that really just takes forever, and these games take forever. They take so long.
That is, I think, part of it for me, but also just like I think part of it is that I'm bad at traditional strategy sometimes. Like I'm bad at sort of learning. Like, okay, I have these abilities, they have those resistances. I don't have a lot of patience, which I guess is not the same as saying I'm bad at it, but also just like I sometimes have difficulty keeping the whole picture in my head and making the ideal decision when my decisions are limited. Whereas, like, with games like Baldur's Gate, for example, I can find there's enough granularity to it since there's, like, kind of a battlefield and there's, like, different, like, abilities that have unpredictable effects that I can kind of find a way at it to cheese it. Like, I can kind of come up with, like, my own way of solving it, which I'm always better at than whatever way they came up with.
So with all that out of the way, what do you think of Darkest Dungeon?
I like it a lot. And I like it in some ways I don't want to say despite the mechanics, because I would say I'm enjoying them. And I think I'm enjoying them because I don't completely suck at them. They're pretty straightforward. They're not hard.
I've actually also recently just started playing Darkest Dungeon myself, despite having owned it for over a year. I was really interested in it when it was early access, but I didn't want to buy it in early access and like play the game while it was unfinished and then like not get the experience of the game in its full state. And then I eventually got it and didn't get around to playing it, and it just kind of sat there for a while. And like a month ago, I started like my first campaign in it. And I like the combat, but I feel like there are way too many different character classes to really work out like how like these character class, like how one character class plays off of another, and how to like build an effective team. Because there's like 20 different character classes, and each character class has 8 different abilities, of which you can bring 4 to an encounter. And you've got to make decisions about which abilities to bring and which abilities to, like, and you upgrade these abilities. So you got to make a decision like pretty early on, like, okay, am I going to lock this hero in as this kind of hero that's got this stuff upgraded?
Right, because each power it's not just, oh, I have this ability and I don't have that ability. It's not just, oh, I have this utility and I don't have that utility. Also, powers usually only work within a certain position in the group. So you find yourself doing a lot of strategizing out of the actual dungeons, where you're just trying to figure out, like, okay, what kinds of parties do I have here? Because it's all well and good to get one party perfect 100%, where the guy in the back has got the best powers for the guy in the back that also synergize with the guy in the third rank who has the best powers for the third rank who also synergizes with the guy who's in the second rank who has the best powers for the second rank who also synergizes with the guy in the first rank. And you get all of that straightened out, and then one of them, like, gets some kind of wasting disease, or, like, needs to take a break, or dies, and you suddenly have to put together a new party, which just throws it all into fucking chaos.
And you don't even touch on the bit where some characters have abilities that move where they are in the placement.
Oh,
and then
yeah,
you gotta balance out like, oh man, well, how do we do that? Because just moving by itself, like if you just pick the move to a different spot option, you spends your entire turn doing that.
Right. And then there's artifacts, and this should give you an idea of why I'm terrible at JRPGs. But so there's artifacts that you equip on your characters that like have very significant effects on their abilities. And not infrequently, I will forget to equip my characters with them before I send them in the dungeon, by which point it is, of course, too late. That's an example. And, you know, obviously this is a problem in Western RPGs, too, but it's like, when you're dealing with systems that are usually fairly, like, overt, and, you know, where, you know, each turn is kind of important, there's less room to wiggle around kind of the default, like, mechanics. Somehow it feels like more of a liability. So the reason I'm playing the game is I actually am a huge fan of what this game accomplishes artistically. And I don't necessarily mean that in any, like, high sense. Like, I don't mean that it has some kind of literary content that I think is... No, I actually just think it's cool as hell. Like, I think that it synergizes really good, evocative art that captures this tone of kind of, like, gothic horror in the dungeon crawling sense. It synergizes that with this awesome narration, which has a great framing device. So basically, the idea is that you, the protagonist, are not actually a represented character, but your role is that you are the inheritor of a house whose head, from like the mansion that was your property and from your lands, was responsible for creating this like Diablo-style corruption, which is spread out in the landscape. And you're coming back to seal it and kind of redeem your family line and also reclaim your heritage. And the beginning narration is a letter being written by, I guess, your father or whatever. I'm not sure it's ever explicitly stated, but he also sort of... So he's dead by the time the game begins, but he sticks around as, like, the voice. He sticks around as, like, the kind of the narrator of the game, and will just narrate, like, little things that happen. And he just has this, like, really unchill, like, vibe going, where he is, like, kind of cynical and bitter and, like, foreboding, and just, you know, there's nothing that happens is ever good with this guy. Maybe it's a little bit good, but it's about to turn bad, and I really dig it. It's almost one of my favorite parts of the game, despite the fact that, of course, it's not hugely consequential in the gameplay sense.
I feel the narrator is the most Lovecraftian element of the game.
Oh, absolutely. It's like a kind of a pocket Lovecraft. Like, let me give you an idea of like this narrator. Like, if you're going to like a burger shop and you discover that you have a 2-for-1 coupon in your pocket, the narrator will suddenly kick in with like, salted flesh, a small trace of comfort in this world. It's just like, you're like, Jesus Christ. I was all chipper, but you kind of took the wind out of my sails there, even though you're trying to hype me up. And then, God forbid, things actually start going badly. Yes.
Yeah.
Like, I want to look up a few quotes just to get this across here. Oh, the voice acting, of course, is incredible for this character, which is great, because he's also, like, the only voice actor. It's just, like, also, like, every little touch in this game is on point. Like, there's a caretaker in, like, the town, which is kind of, like, your interface for upgrading everything. And his mechanical function is that he, like, occupies... occasionally he occupies slots that you would want to put your hero into, because he just goes around town doing his thing. So he's, in a board game, he's kind of like the spoiler unit. Like the bandit in Catan, but the art for the character is just like this giggling, like manic dude who's living in the Hellmouth, but who's just fucking loving it, and it's really such a small thing, but it's really cool. Okay, a couple narrator quotes here. All right, so here's like what it says like when you click on the tavern like for the first time. Like the tavern. Fresh kegs, cards, and curtained rooms promise solace to the weary and the broken alike. Like that's the narration for the fucking bar. The bar in Helltown. It's like, imagine they put that over the door. People would just like get shit-faced in a ditch.
So, you know what I want now? I want someone to mod all of that voice actors files into The Sims and just have that pop up like when you buy a new refrigerator or something. I want a relentlessly happy game that has that guy as the narrator doing those lines.
Yeah, oh my god, I really want a Sims, like, somebody to make, like, at least a captioned, like, Sims Darkest Dungeon mashup. Like, your Sim is about to, like, has to go to the bathroom, but they're, like, stuck at work, and it's, like, dazed, reeling, about to break. Or, like, when, like, one of your Sims, like, leaves the house because he can't take the other Sims, just another soul, battered and broken, cast aside like a spent torch. Your Sim doesn't make his aspiration see create a new household. Suffer not the lame horse, nor the broken man. You clean your apartment. Driving out corruption is an endless battle, but one that must be fought.
So you're just reading from quotes from the game?
At this point, yes. You design a house with a bad layout. The Swinefolk's Labyrinth may yet prove to be navigable.
I don't know if The Sims is smart enough to know when a house has a bad layout.
I actually kind of wonder. Is it possible? Like, because it seems to me that, like, it actually, I wonder now how much of the design work in The Sims is done, like, manually. Like, I guess there aren't so many houses and businesses that they can't just have somebody who's full-time is to just put together this doll furniture. But it would also seem...
It's definitely 100% like hand-built. Like, the houses in the game are way too good to have been, like, randomly generated or anything like that.
I guess that's true.
And the way that they like especially when you see like in The Sims 4, there's the city, like the urban neighborhood, and like those have to integrate specifically into like these skyscraper models and whatever. So like, yeah, it's definitely like all hand built and coordinated. Clearly, someone who has some understanding of architecture, because they make stuff that looks way better than I do.
What's our time?
I think we've been going for like 35, 45 minutes.
Yeah, they're about...
Oh, all right. Want to just call it? We have a mailbag?
I have an email from PayPal on the mailbag.
Let's do that.
Because I had an old PayPal account that was like tied to my main email, so I couldn't put it and it was like I think something I made when I was like 16, and it had my dad's name on it, and like PayPal is an ass about changing anything, so like I couldn't use that account. But I also can't sign up for an account, like two PayPal accounts on the same email, so I put one on the Spoiler Warning Show email at some point because it was the other email that I had around. So in addition to mailbag stuff, I occasionally get PayPal credit offers, and it's like, no, I never want a credit card from you, PayPal, you piece of shit payment system. I hate PayPal, by the way. It's horrible. So that's the mailbag, I guess. If you're an awful internet payment company used by eBay, please send us an email at spoilerwarningshow@gmail.com with your credit card offers that I will ignore. So,
well, I guess we may as well call that an episode.
All right. Say goodbye, everyone, Campster.
Goodbye, everyone, Campster.